Before tonight's broadcast can commence, there's something I gotta address right up front. I'm sorry, but the Club Penguin joke is played out. Okay, let's rock. What you see here is the 1985 Japanese theatrical animated film Penguin's Memory, Shiawase Monogatari. It's an oddity, known for its delicate portrait of a young man wounded both physically and emotionally by his experiences in war, returning to a life he must put back together in order to, well, find happiness. That just so happens to feature a cast of cute penguin characters. I think it's a lovely little movie, touching as it is bemusing, more than a novelty with a scope far greater than its elevator pitch. It's a romantic, sprawling road film first, a war film second. But because it opens on it, and because it's the thing it's known for, I too will open my thoughts on the film with the war stuff. Mike Davis, age 26, and his platoon buddies are introduced in a tropical jungle under a heavy downpour of bullets. After one man, Tom, is injured in an explosion, they take refuge in a cave to tend his wounds. What struck me right away was the stark contrast between these two scenes. The brutality of the warfare is legitimately startling, but the elongated quiet that follows, significantly longer, is the tone setter. Mike and Tom play harmonica, talk about their next steps on the battlefield, but mostly sit there in contemplative silence. By the 10-minute mark, Mike is back home, drifting listlessly through friends and family who don't understand that the war he participated in, the Delta War, was not a noble one. When it becomes clear the people that made up the life he once knew are far more interested in celebrating his involvement in the war rather than his safe return from it, Mike quietly leaves town to start anew, where the main plot begins in earnest. And quietly is the adverb of choice here. And so, Mike quietly travels all around ostensibly America on a path I tried and failed to chart because I don't think it's geographically accurate to anywhere in the country, but it's definitely pseudo-America in the pseudo-60s, much as the Delta War is the pseudo-Vietnam War, and there's a strong sense of place everywhere he goes. Together with Mike, you see many sides of the country, struggling townships, violent underbellies, miserly casinos, and lonesome libraries, which Mike takes a particular liking to. But right as you think, oh, it's not a war movie, it's a road movie, you're forced to reckon with a frightening possibility. Oh my god, it's not a war movie, and it's not a road movie, it's a fucking musical! Nah, for real, I actually think this scene is really cute, the kids singing along, my heart. I like all the song sequences, and as we'll learn, they were totally critical in getting this film made at all, and it is here we're introduced to aspiring singer and love interest Jill. And musical anxieties assuaged, the film once more shifts into another Hollywood paradigm, a romantic drama of competing loves, aspirations, and agendas. Despite its balancing act of so many moods and tones, Penguin's Memory is quite deft, very well made. Its runtime is about 105 minutes, uncommon for anime films not directed by Rintaro. This allows it to linger in each space it creates. The fluid animation has subtle flair, and all that inspiration taken from live-action film is reflected in its direction. There's as much a priority placed on interesting shot composition and blocking as the animation itself. However, there is one downside to its sleeve-worn influence: the goddamn noir vignetting. Nearly every shot is smeared in these muddy overlays clearly meant to guide the eye, but in the laserdisc quality this film is currently trapped in, it only stands to compromise the image. The occasional missed frame where the photography staff missed the overlays are like breaths of fresh air, dude. I have a feeling it wasn't too much better in the theater, though. It's seriously so overbearing. Dark vignetting, light vignetting, blue vignetting, sepia vignetting. Here, look, I can do this too. To wrap back to one of the elephants in the penguin room, they play the penguin thing totally straight. At first there's comedy in it, but within like 5 minutes it clicked for me without even realizing it. Which is a good thing, because I would have felt whipped to shit if, while chuckling to myself about the funny penguin armed combat, I was confronted with the image of an injured, crying infant being evacuated from the wreckage of its former home. But there's a cycle of lucidity here. It occasionally gets really funny again that they're penguins. Oh god, their feet don't touch the floor. For me, it doesn't distract from the pathos, but his eye patch only covers his pupil. Off and on, I imagined a cut of the film where their footsteps are accompanied by gentle little slapping sounds. Your assumption upon hitting the spacebar on your modern computer or tapping the screen of your modern cellular phone is likely in line with cartoons that sardonically juxtapose the horrors of war with innocent-looking funny animals, your Mickey Mouse in Vietnam's Apocalypse Poos, or perhaps something more like Fievel Goes West or high school library comic shelf staple Mouse, who captured the disempowerment of its cast by depicting them as vulnerable prey, or even a story that renders the viewer the vulnerable one, lulling them into a false sense of security only to Lucy Van Pelt football you so hard your spine turns to gelatin, where Penguin's memory gets all the war stuff out of the way up front. I'm talking the infamously Sanrio-produced Nine Inch Nails Tales-ified Bambi alternative, Ringing Bell, but the penguins in Penguin's memory are penguins because they're penguins, right? Dear God, how many elephants can you fit in one room? There's another aspect of this thing's small-scale infamy that's going to take up pretty much the rest of this video's runtime. What's all this about Penguin's memory being a commercial for Suntory beer? Well, that's what they say anyway, but there are a number of moments where perfect opportunities for overt product placement arise. Al says his wounded comrade would be fine if only he had a cold beer. One of them will pull one out of their jackets, right? No. At his return party, Mike drinks wine, no brand. All the booze is unbranded, even the whiskey. Knowing that going in, it creates an itch in your brain you can't scratch. When is it Suntory time? When is it Suntory time? When is it Suntory time? Here's the short version. Penguin's Memory is co-produced by Suntory, and while no Suntory branding appears in the film, its characters and some of its set pieces are derived from a series of smash hit commercials that brought its new canned beer products to the forefront of Japan's alcohol consumption in the early 1980s. But why? This is the real question the long version seeks to answer, a question under which 1,000 micro-questions scurry out from when investigated. Why isn't there any Suntory branding in this film? Why does this film exist? Why do people keep calling it A Penguin's Memories? Why did these ultra-popular penguin mascots seem to disappear overnight? Why is this advertisement telling children to buy beer? I feel an obligation to this tale of happiness to gather up all its tendrils and tie them in a single bow. Because my nose is so up close, the Club Penguin meme does legitimately annoy me, but I'm nearly embarrassed to admit that. It's a petty, forgivable annoyance that I would never argue contributes to a misrepresentation of Penguin's Memory's whole thing. Ditto goes for calling it a movie about a penguin more. I get it. Irrespective of its quality, there are all of these fault lines running through it that confuse and bewilder, on their surface bearing no insight into the very interesting people, history, and circumstances that brought it into existence. In my journey to become a Suntory Penguin pseudo-expert, I've closely studied books, magazines, blogs, catalogs, interviews, so many Yahoo Japan auctions listings, idol music, 8-bit video games, 1940s and 70s American cinema, Olympic controversies, Joe Camel, and the sum knowledge of all the other Suntory Penguin pseudo-experts the world over. So I ask you to come on a bit of an odyssey with me, as I've once again seen the universe unfurl before me within the tunneling protein matrices of the inside of a McDonald's burger bun. So, while many brains associate the film with flipping icebergs and the risks of occupational injury associated with barista work, domestically, the film is part of a larger whole. These commercials, much the same as plushes, beach balls, bedpans, and washcloths, in many ways symbolize a romantic image of the bygone era they were born into. A truly successful mascot character is one that comes to represent much more than its brand, both to individual consumers and culture at large. So long as the tether to its source is left intact, any other association is a bonus. Frightening though it may be, branding shapes our world, and I think just how far I'd let these short-lived beer mascots take me is a pretty strong sign.
Здесь не ходят. В зоне вообще прямой путь не самый.
Alright, who's ready for a good old-fashioned Hazel self-indulgently parochial segue? Well, our first stop is none other than my hometown of Petaluma, California, located in beautiful Sonoma County, the, liver of California's wine country. Through my lifetime, I watched the town's beautiful rolling hills reduced to Google employee fetus fields, but a long time before you or I, its nexus was a community of Stalinist agriculturalists who paved the way for its rise to butter and eggs capital of the world. Or maybe country, I can't remember. Anyway, I spent some of the first years of my life in a house that overlooked what was, at the time, a Clover Stornetta production plant, now Clover Sonoma, who carries the torch for Petaluma's association with the dairy industry. I'm a little bit obsessed with this Instagram account, normal_characters, which documents one-off, vaguely threatening clip art abominations found on strip malls and off-brand food products. When I first learned about this page, my mind returned to a familiar face. Clover the cow. Clo for short. For more than 55 years, Clove's dad-level pun-themed antics line billboards all over California's North Bay. So many, in fact, that they've been collected in 3 volumes, or I guess 1 volume 3 times, just brought up to date each time. Tip Clo Through Your 2 Lips is the essential one. Clover the Rainbow, it's a classic. I remember seeing that one for years. Clo commemorates the 50th anniversary of D-Day. Am I having a stroke? Choreographer? Hey, those are my guys! Whether I like it or not, he's also my guy. Clo's like a kooky aunt to me, but everyone in my life who isn't from NorCal finds her visage utterly repellent. Ah, fuck. Look, I don't know, a cow doesn't make for particularly good creamery mascots. Like, you have to look at this 12-square-foot udder and you just know. Putting her in wacky outfits does not help. But when my mind reaches for the quintessential versatile mascot animal, the era in which I was raised supersedes the location.
Oh, you again!
It's the mid-2000s. Every time you turn on your television, you hear Steve Martin saying the word hamburger wrong in a comedic fashion. Eminem is still grabbing his you-know-what. Windows XP takes 45 minutes to boot. A Game Boy Advance with a worm light cannot distract you from the Chuck E. Cheese interior miasma. You hear your first racial epithet on Newgrounds.com. 9/11 is awesome because class is cancelled. Xbox is a god to you. Goku is more your father than your own. George Lopez's fictional son is dyslexic. Your earliest memories all take place in the parking lot of a divorce court. A split path opens before you. Either you have your first gay experience playing Star Wars Battlefront 2, or Misty Pokemon makes you feel something you can't yet identify.
Now that's what I call music volume 17!
You can't wash the blood off your hands. And suddenly, every theater, thusly every birthday you're only invited to because the whole class was invited, is flooded with Penguin movies. The aughts Penguin boom Helen of Troy is 2005's March of the Penguins, a heavily narrativized collection of documentary footage capturing the annual migration of the emperor penguin that raked in more than $100 million at the box office. Fundamentalists declare the film supports and reinforces traditional family values, critically lacking at a time when children were learning all of their swear words from SpongeBob SquarePants. Yes, that line of thinking is stupid, one the film's director openly loathed, but there's a universal truth in such a reach.
Is there such thing as insanity among penguins?
Could they just go crazy because they've had enough of their colony?
Penguins are perhaps the easiest animal to anthropomorphize. They walk upright, their markings resemble human clothes, the dress of a dapper gentleman. Upon their cute faces is a blank expression of which any emotion can be mapped. See none other than inspiration for 2D cons the world over, Tobu Zoo's Grape Coon, whose one true love was Hululu, the pensive-faced penguin Gijinka from Kemono Friends. The Japanese word for penguin is well, penguin, penguin, but if you were to write the word out in kanji, it's jincho, literally human bird. On another level, penguins are very cute and very funny. Watching them waddle about and slide on their tummies elicits genuine feelings of moe. There's a whimsy about them that marks a transitional period in the kids' media culture from the gross-out butthead humor attitude era of the 90s that parents loathed, to a more family-oriented, wacky, overtly referential, sarcastic but saccharine style. It's DreamWorksification. The studio struck gold when Shrek was a hit with both children and parents, and attentive studios began following suit, unleashing a flurry of mixed successes that gradually shed all the burping and farting and shitting ogres, which coalesced with an unexpected cultural fixation on penguins. Here's an example. If you want to crank up the quirk dial, take the notably Antarctic bird and drop it in a setting utterly ill-fitting for it. Like, say, a sunny beach. Let's not acknowledge those penguins that are native to the coast of South Africa, okay? Normies don't know about those. Anyway, their mixture of cute, cool, and comedic appeals to everyone they were trying to appeal to. Everyone. I loved penguins as a kid for the above reasons, and I did not even like any of these movies. They were my favorite animal, at least until my teens. I used this particular cultural moment to establish a baseline familiar to most of my viewers. Penguins have appealed to ages high and low all through history, and of course our story is rooted some 20 years in a Pacific Ocean away. So let us rewind.
Beer! Psh, goo, 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 pss.
The accepted narrative goes that beer was first introduced to Japan by the Dutch in the 1700s, who were at the time Japan's so-called window to the West, its only Western commercial trade partner. This was in very limited numbers and fostered no domestic industry. It wouldn't be until its global trade routes reopened that Japan's relationship to the beverage began in earnest, though perhaps not on the right foot. Here's a quote from a paper by University of Toronto's Jeffrey M. Pilcher, drawing upon Jeffrey W. Hold on, I don't think that's right. They're not both named Jeffrey, are they? Oh my god, they're both named Jeffrey. Jeffrey M. Pilcher, drawing upon Jeffrey W. Alexander's book, Brewed in Japan.
Japan's first reported tasting of European-style beer came in 1854 at the signing of the Treaty of Kanagawa, which opened trade with the United States. After sampling from kegs of beer presented to the Shogun by Commodore Matthew Perry, one Japanese official compared the exotic liquid to bitter horse piss. Despite this inauspicious start, local entrepreneurs soon began brewing, and within a century, Western beer had surpassed indigenous sake as the nation's best-selling alcoholic drink.
Okay, let's fast forward. 1980, the dawn of the Great Beer Wars. Exactly what it sounds like. The four giants of Japanese beer production, Kirin, Sapporo, Asahi, and Suntory, hotly compete for the crown, dominant market share. At the time, Kirin held 50%, with Sapporo and Asahi lagging behind, while Suntory seemed like it had died at the starting line with a paltry 4 to 5%. But the underdog refused to give in, struggling, enduring, contending, deploying every possible strategy to get a leg up. It was around this time that Suntory launched a line of canned beer to stay on the cutting edge. Even after all this research, I struggle, endure, and contend with the significance between canned and bottled beer. Why one would be a hit but not the other? I've heard something about light exposure making beer acrid, cans are more durable and stackable, and supposedly they maintain more of the carbon dioxide, but all of these are improvements over bottled beer, and any company also selling bottled beer can't exactly capitalize on that without harming bottled beer sales. This isn't my lane, though. I don't really drink. I mean, even I can see the improvement over these horrible looking plastic steins. Perhaps it simply was that it was different. Regardless, to make these cans a hit, Suntory enlisted the help of ad agency Hakuhodo. Here are our key players. Takeo Nagasawa, primarily a copywriter, served as a creative director, leading the project by inference of market trends, the cultural zeitgeist, etc. Seiju Toda served as the the art director, helming the project on a conceptual level. Both roles are vague from the outside, and Japanese credits like these tend to carry different nuances than English language conceptions. In an advertising context, art direction was easier for me to understand, and Toda's influence is more central to this story, but both men are very well respected and accomplished as collaborators and in their own rights. Art directors, referring to those outside film, animation, games, comics, you get it, specialize in the presentation, graphic design, and slogans of products and advertisements. Here are some of the logos Toda's worked on, and he's credited in the creation of Fukui Television's mascot Ear-Ear-chan, who I think is adorable. He's a member of Tokyo Art Directors Club, which is exactly what it sounds like. They promote design and give out annual awards to designers. The chair is Gon Hosoya, who, not to overshadow Toda, designed the packaging for both Pocari Sweat and Calorie Mate. The Calorie Mate packaging is utter perfection in my eyes, having received virtually no design changes since its introduction in '83. A genius application of the most direct approach is the most successful sensibility. It's a product sold on nutritional completeness. Cover the thing wall to wall with a big, bright, bold list of ingredients. I think I gravitated toward this detail despite its Winchester Mystery House level tangency. Because I'm a certified Metal Gear Solid 3 is my favorite one girl, Calorie Mate's anachronism there makes its design pop all the more. Hey, did you know the flavor of Calorie Mate is different depending on the version? It's chocolate on PS2, maple on PS3, and vanilla on PS4. Not sure about the 3DS. And place your bets whether it'll be cheese or fruit flavored in the remake. Or if it'll be in the remake. Yeah, it is, and it's cheese. Funnily, Kiefer Sutherland, before he played Snake, did a Calorie Mate commercial. They kind of keep cropping up in video games, I guess. They also appear in Disaster Report 3, and there's a licensed game where you play as a can of Calorie Mate liquid that I think might be ideologically evil. The whole game is about assisting an indie developer in the noble undertaking that is brutalizing late development crunch. It's okay that you don't have time to shower or feed yourself. Calorie Mate Cafe au lait provides all the nutrients you need to not die. They give you a picture of their ethos. Toda and Nagasawa worked together on the Suntory 5 Geniuses series of commercials, which capture a bizarre assortment of disconnected 19th century smart guys. Architect Antoni Gaudet, composer Gustav Mahler, entomologist Jean-Henry Faber, writer, traveler, and gay boy Arthur Rimbaud. The fifth genius is like multiple journalists. The one for Rimbaud is, I think, the most remembered of the bunch. While I'm not read up enough to understand the allusions to his travels, it's drawn parallels to Federico Fellini's La Strada. House of Leaves fans in the audience perked up, I'm sure. That's a thing in that book, right? Judging by the contents of these uploads, I think the series was crafted to serve a dual purpose. They uphold an air of refinement befitting of Royale whiskey, yes, but everyone says they were frightened by them as children. They exist in such stark contrast to other traditionally upbeat commercials that they get lodged into the brain, a pretty novel approach at the time, and a risk that paid off in dividends. Last of the Hakuhodo gang, we have copywriter Yuichi Watanabe, who wrote the copy for the Nissin Cup Noodle Arnold Schwarzenegger commercials. Should I explain what a copywriter is? If you're watching this, you likely learned this term at age 12 thanks to a perverse interest in a tiny sliver of the robust career of friend to all, Onpo protest king, situational guy on Iron Chef, #1 hot boy turned #1 hot dad, and man behind Nintendo's Shigesato Itoi's bass fishing #1, Shigesato Itoi. I'll put myself on blast here and say for way too long I assumed he dealt in copyright, you know, the opposite of copyleft. Copywriters write copy, like ad copy, slogans, that sort of thing. Just do it, when it rains it pours, Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Itoya actually also did some ad copy for Suntory. Wow, sorry I keep bringing up more famous guys to illustrate these people's jobs. Watanabe, under the supervision of Nagasawa and Toda, banged out nearly 300 different pieces of potential copy in hopes of a hit with Suntory's bigwigs. Some such left to die on the vine include "My staple foods are lettuce, love, and canned beer," and "I love canned beer as much as my ex-boyfriend." The winner was, "Deposit your canned beer and lost love in the nearest wastebasket." Reportedly, in tandem with some other nondescript marketing changes, this slogan that I imagine reads better in its native tongue got the can rolling among metropolitan young adults. We now flash forward 2 years. It's December 1982, the cold winter after a summer dominated by E.T. the Extraterrestrial. That's not unnecessary set dressing this time. See, the Hakuhodo boys saw E.T. as a shining example of a fantastical, whimsical little mascot character that could expand Suntory's brand to and beyond the hip young urbanites, making their beer known even among families. Grandma and grandpa and mom and dad? People who can't be described as hip young urbanites? Amidst another jam sesh, dozens more proposals were made featuring different mascot concepts, but it was a calendar in Seiju Toda's bedroom that served as the golden ticket. Enter Norio Hikone. Nagasawa and Toda may be credited as the Penguins' creators, but Norio Hikone holds a title of greater prestige. Their grandpa. I mean this positively, but the man radiates grandpa. Sound the alarms, we got another guy I love now who I only found because I have a job I refuse to explain to primary care providers, Lyft drivers, and my extended family. A veteran freelance animator and character designer with a career spanning 65 years, Hikone's fingerprints are on such a breadth of projects, big and small, famous and obscure, that I'm near certain you've seen his work at least in passing. Here's the rundown. After graduating college in 1959, Hikone joined Toei and worked on, among others, Wolf Boy Ken, the studio's very first TV anime. He left Toei in 1965 for Mushi Pro, Osamu Tezuka's studio. While his time at Mushi Pro was short, it was long enough for him to bag the only woman on the Kimba staff. Gotta respect the game. From 1966 to the modern day, he's been freelance. A lot of his work in animation, both before and after going freelance, is quite mercenary, but he did get some work that's more representative of his personal style, such as his work for Minna no Uta, NHK's long-running series of family-friendly animated music videos, often showcasing the talents of established and beloved figures in the anime industry. And that personal style of his is his ultimate meal ticket, which he primarily utilized in the realm of commercial and mascot character design. In '72, he began his relationship to confectionery company Meiji, over the years designing like so many mascot characters for their various snack products, some of which you may have even seen lining Japanese grocery and import store snack aisles where you live. Kinoko no Yama, Takenoko no Sato, Oyachai, Kanitan, Iodine mouthwash, and plenty of others. His most iconic contribution to the Meiji world is for curl. Cheese curls? Since in phonetic Japanese you'd say curl and Carl the same way, here is Carl Oji-san, Uncle Carl, no relation. There's an insane amount of merch and even more variant packaging featuring this guy and his animal buddies. This whole Meiji expanded universe. I got kind of sick of being so exposed to him. I think Hikone shines with the little animal buddies, so okay, I actually didn't know he was packing like that. Damn, and this slutty tramp stamp? Alright, Oji-san. Beyond Meiji, the big man's done designs for brands all the way from Cosmo Oil to chain restaurant King of Gyoza to the damn Ministry of Finance? What? I think my favorite non-penguins are the Ursine family promoting Hitachi's White Bear air conditioner, and the Aviva Japan Technical School granny learning to use the computer. That's me, bitch! She's also pretty relevant here because a massive shout out needs to go to Hikone and his staff for their early adoption of the internet, which they've used to track his career with an extensive archive of his work since the dawn of the new millennium at least. Their dedication really helped this video. I'm very appreciative. They've documented mascots he doesn't remember the origin of, and even various failed pitches. Love these sea butterflies. Oh, and get this, he did the designs and animation of the animal friends for Full Circle Moment, Shigesato Itoi's Bass Fishing #1. I swear I wrote that thing about Itoi before I made this connection. I actually played some of these games on stream recently, and they rock. immaculate vibes. Sounds like the development team presented Hikone with a list of personality types that he would design the characters around.
There are some characters in there that are rather twisted. Who came up with those ones, I wonder? Maybe Mr. Itoi?
Getting sucked into reading all about Hikone's career was an early phase in research for this video, so I became quite familiar with his style and body of work. It was rewarding when late in the process I learned exactly how he came to be involved with Suntory. Back to that calendar. Affixed to art director Seiju Toda's wall was a calendar featuring Meiji's Carota, who I kept wanting to call Carotan. At the time, the representative for their Apollo chocolates. Something clicked one night before bed, and Toda found himself somewhat fixated on him. So he scribbled him cracking open a cold one, and brought this pencil drawing to Suntory's PR team with the suggestion that Norio Hikone design a penguin character, a callback to a commercial for Suntory's not canned beer, released early in 1982, featured some penguins who dance around on the beach, see what I said earlier, which led audiences to bombard Suntory's phone lines, demanding to know if they were puppets or real penguins or what. Following a green light from Suntory and an okay from Hikone and his people, it was time for a penguin to be born. It's early 1983 now, and within the pages of the Asahi Shimbun, no relation, a newspaper that was apparently popular with young adults, a one-page advertisement of a penguin holding a can of beer was found, bearing the phrase, "Have you seen it? Have you tried it? Suntory's new canned beer." The sum efforts of Toda and Nagasawa's decision-making, Hikone's art, and Watanabe's writing were officially testing the waters before the brand invested in greater endeavors with this potential mascot. If it failed in print, hardly anyone would ask where it went. While the Hakuhodo team were feeling the strategy out and producing more print ads, Suntory got to concocting a relevant beverage. At the time, Suntory had a partnership with the Izakaya Kitano Kazoku. With this link being established in the minds of consumers, Suntory deepened its association with bars by introducing Penguin's Bar, a draft beer featuring ultra-sleek cans designed by Katsu Kimura. These were sold alongside Suntory's regular canned beer, presumably allowing for a parallel marketing strategy. So it is Penguin's Bar that brought about Suntory's next penguin-themed TV commercials. Following the one with the real live penguins they tortured into dancing for them the year prior. Just kidding, they were puppets, obviously. They advertised their tie-in with Kitano Kazoku in one commercial using probably the same penguins. This penguin is an adult human man though, and it's a cute commercial. I try not to say this sort of thing too often, but it's so 80s. Let's check out the other Penguins Bar commercial. Alright, we got a claymation thing going, and oh god, no! Damn it! Oh god, jeez, okay, well, judging by the fact that there is mercifully only one of these, it's safe to assume the advertising for Penguins Bar underwhelmed, so it was time for an entirely new approach, and the positive reception to those dead simple, stout little penguins lugging around tall boys gave a clear path forward. With such cutesy, appealing characters, it was important to the Hakuhodo boys to make something with a decisively mature atmosphere so as to not appeal to kids, or more realistically, not to kids more than adults. So I guess the family demographic does mean not hip 20-somethings. Maybe. Commercial director Shunji Kimura was the man chosen to adultify things, and his initial spark to achieve that goal was actually not, in fact, penguin sex or penguin violence. But however it got there, Kimura wanted the commercial to end in a penguin bursting into tears. With further development, Casablanca became a framework. You know, of all the beer joints in the world, she walks into mine, I guess. You got the smoky bar, the lounge singer. Kimura cut no corners too. In order to capture this as naturalistically as he could, he filmed a jazz piano player in order to replicate his finger movements, which is just so delightful to me because, well, you see, penguins don't have fingers. Multiple guys who have had their hands on the whole Suntory penguin operation have said that during pitches they were constantly prefacing everything with "please don't laugh." Next, they secured TV personality George Tokaro to narrate the copy. Gamers in the audience may know Tokaro for his appearance in a couple Nintendo commercials, or a dogshit Famicom game that licensed his image. He also voiced Ponyo's hot dad. Everything else was in order. Now all Kimura and company needed was a song. In June of '83, J-pop masterminds Masaaki Omura and Muneo Wakamatsu were shown the concept pitch. At the time, the two worked closely with Seiko Matsuda, quite possibly among the most beloved and respected idols to grace Japan. The songwriting duo swiftly wrote a ballad in a lounge style, missing the memo that Kimura initially wanted something bluesy. Shortly thereafter, Matsuda recorded it with a Suntory rep in attendance. It was clear they'd struck gold.
Boom. #1 record, right from there. Boom, it's a fucking smash.
Sweet Memories is a molecularly perfect song, and today it's one of her biggest hits and it's been covered like 1 billion times. But when the commercial finally debuted in the late summer, nobody even knew it was her. There was no credit tag. By this point, Matsuda had been a known figure in the idol world already, but excessive touring had put a strain on her voice, which caused it to take on a new quality. This happened to me. Her performance in the commercial was some of the first exposure audiences had to this maturation in her sound, so few were able to make the connection. Legend has it, Matsuda's own mother didn't recognize her. Before and after this stint of Penguin commercials, Matsuda's been in 100,000 billion commercials. I found a particular compilation that runs 38 minutes long. This also happened to me. There's a little bit of a conspiracy here. Takemi Mamiya, author of Our Advertising Era, whose chapter on the Suntory Penguins was instrumental in making this video 45% less wishy-washy, claims this confusion was milked by the parties involved. Inquirers were routed to phone lines belonging to guys who didn't have any answers to keep the buzz building. Could it have been deliberate from the start, or simply a matter of TV ad convention? I don't know. Either way, they conceded, altering the commercial to give Matsuda credit, and the song was released to record stores the country over. The single for the Haruomi Hosono penned Glass Apple contained the song as a B-side initially, but in later editions it was re-released as a double A-side, 2 hits on 1 disc, rather than a hit and an outtake. David Lynch would call the Suntory Sweet Memories commercial the eye of the duck to the sweeping epic before us today, the story's nucleus. An unforeseen spectacle, difficult to understand in isolation, that somehow makes everything else make sense. Ah, so that's why there are musical numbers in Penguin's Memory. Ah, that's why it's called Penguin's Memory. Ah, that's why the commercial's remembered so widely today, and that's why its imagery is all over the film. The thick atmosphere was impossible to ignore, each element in perfect harmony with the rest. Perhaps a case of good timing teed the commercial up to an extent, with the record-breaking success of Koreyoshi Kurahara's Antarctica, which had become the highest-grossing domestic film in the nation's history at the time of its release, right around when the Sweet Memories commercial began airing. The South Pole was on people's minds. Regardless, it was the commercial's sentimental tone that grabbed audiences' hearts. Matsuda's nostalgia-drenched voice grabbed their ears, and its darling little penguin characters grabbed their wallets. Now, this is something that any parties who are directly involved are incentivized to recount, but in the commercial's wake, Suntory's canned beer sales skyrocketed. Probably the weirdest outcome of this is a commercial for Suntory Aid, a non-alcoholic beverage, in which Norio Hikone himself appears alongside E.T., the very first domino to this whole thing. Around the clock, viewers were clogging up the phone lines, asking about the storyline and when more commercials would be released. Magazines, newspapers, and TV stations were banging down their doors, and not one of these characters even had a name. Mike and Jill are exclusively the names of the characters in Penguin's Memory. They're not the same characters we see in the commercials, despite looking identical. Perhaps you could think of them as animated actors playing out roles for the commercials and film. Somewhere along the way, the ad ad team took to calling the boy Nekura Penguin. Literally gloomy penguin! I smiled so big when I read that. So of course a whole series of commercials, all of which featuring Tokoro's voiceover and most of which featuring Matsuda's songs, were produced from summer of '83 to sometime in '85. In fall of '83, after much anticipation, a second commercial was released. It featured our unnamed gloomy pengtagonist in a boxing ring, having just had his head handed to him. A lady penguin, presumably the lounge singer, brings him a cold one, which is legit dangerous, by the way. Don't drink after a head injury, kids. Mamiya and Kimura say 1949's The Setup was the touchstone, running with the Golden Age Hollywood theme. But Hikone's influence stemmed elsewhere. Earlier that year, Rocky had graced the country's airwaves for the first time on Getsuyo Roadshow and became quite popular. So he picked up a tape for closer study, and this was at a time when VHS was an exorbitantly expensive format, only to find that it did not work. This is one of my favorite anecdotes from my research, just has huge energy. This commercial also served as inspiration for another scene in Penguin's memory, although far bleaker, where Mike participates in an underground fight club to fulfill a self-destructive impulse. Woo! Does this count as cockfighting? This is actually the scene immediately before the first song sequence. Literal Final Fantasy VII Disc 1 to 2 swap type shit. Commercials continued to roll out seasonally, gradually shedding the Hollywood shtick and branching out to other music artists. A song by Enka-gai Takashi Hosokawa, which was composed by a pre-Mother Keiichi Suzuki, Small Industry. I Remember You by Shinobu Otake, Snowflakes by Agnes Chan, who was selected because her English was really good. Matsuda's English on Sweet Memories was a significant and talked about element. The other Matsuda cuts were Blue Love Letter and Boy no Kisatsu, both of which appear in Penguin's memory. Although funnily, even after all the confusion over Sweet Memories, the commercial from the winter of '84 features a song that is still to this day unknown, though most folks speculate it's Matsuda. From the initial home run, Suntory acted fast and introduced tons and tons of additional Penguin-related products. They swiftly replaced Penguin's Bar entirely with Hikone Penguin stamped bottles and cans. Just clap your hands, just clap your hands. I keep saying it, I don't trifle with beer and plastic. And these look way too much like soft drinks for kids or something. In response to the popularity of Chuhai, Suntory followed a familiar formula and based a drink off another popular commercial of theirs, this time for a Suntory mild vodka with an octopus-themed slogan. So, Taco High, featuring Taco High Taco Boy. And while they're at it, Gorilla Beer. This one did not land. Suntory's sharpest reaction to this newfound boom was getting about 1,000 million character goods manufactured. Many were given away via mail-in campaigns, but so much merch was being made, a Suntory goods shop opened in Sony Ginza Plaza. Ashtrays, clocks, hand towels, shirts, drinking glasses, cassette labels, blow-up dolls, puzzles, pencil cases, stickers? When you look at enough of this stuff, you start seeing all these different names. What is the official title for this merch line? Well, it changed a couple times. An early one was Mellow Fantasy, then Penguin Family, one word. All the way in the mid-90s, they adopted the name Penguin Paradise, then Penguin's Paradise. Then, finally, in 2001, this is what most people know and refer to them as in English language documentation, Poppy Poo Penguins. Sort of reading down the Japanese alphabet, it's like a lali-lule-lo thing. I haven't used the name and will continue to avoid it unless I'm talking about the aughts, because this name was only adopted after their association with Suntory ended. It's an artist formerly known as Prince situation. Furthermore, I feel the use of these characters in the modern age is so different than Suntory's application that they're almost two different things. I'm still not sure why Suntory had all those other names in rotation, but it certainly helps to illustrate just how saturated these penguins were. In fact, some say this led to a penguin mascot character boom. Wasn't Tuxedo Sam introduced in 1979? Surely you'd attribute that to him, right? Actually, while gathering clips for this video, I searched Tuxedo Sam CM, and no shit, the only results were these Suntory commercials. Anyway, I'm a person with the kind of brain chemistry that predisposes me to highly patternistic thinking, so I began to identify some, well, patterns. My mind first drifted to the glut of Penguin video games from the 80s. Penguin Land, Binary Land, Penguin Wars, no relation. But it's Konami's output that's the most instructive. Penta and his wife Penko, their son Pentaro, and Pentaro's girlfriend Hanako. That is Pentaro and his girlfriend Hanako. Kinda lost their sauce with that last one. Were some of the many recurring characters in the developers' lineup that could be described as their mascots. Their family tree is mapped across Arctic Adventure, Penguin Adventure, Yume Penguin Monogatari, the Parodius series, and dozens of cameo appearances. Penguin Adventure is of particular note, of course, for being the first game directed by Captain Big Dick himself, Hideo Kojima. You ever hear about the penguin suit concept that never made it into Metal Gear Solid 3? Frogger's Journey, the Forgotten Relic, is also of note for blasting you in the face with Frogger's big bare feet right when you turn the game on. Their introduction into Parodius in 1990 sure is evocative of something, isn't it? But really, their entire design shtick from day one in December of '83 is too. It just occurred to me that this game literally opens with a penguin bursting into tears. So many aesthetic choices are a one-to-one match for Suntory's penguins. The stout, pear-shaped bodies, the mono eye containing two emoting pupils, very similar beak shape where the upper and lower mandibles meet. At a glance, you'd mistake them. And while the lady penguins distinguish things, they're pink, you see, like ladies are, and they have bows, not flowers, they're actually the smoking gun. I'm not interested in calling plagiarism anywhere, but Suntory's as of yet unnamed penguins were Adam and Eve to countless penguin characters that sprouted up all over 80s Japan, which I guess makes Tuxedo Sam like the gay uncle. I'm certain these two were the progenitors, not only because it's widely corroborated in anecdotes across the web, but because near every one of these follows an implicit style guide so rigid you could map it out on a fucking Punnett square. It was tricky at first. I, like dozens listing these items secondhand, was prone to getting mixed up on what was and wasn't an official product, but I've developed the nose of a Bavarian mountain hound when it comes to sussing out which penguins were and weren't directly aping Hikone's work. The dead giveaway is when there are two characters, a boy penguin and a girl penguin who is wearing something on her head. Flower, bow, sometimes they make her pink. The Jungian male-female mascot duo goes back at least as far as Michael and Minerva Mouse. The Plowboy? Jesus Christ! But the distinction in the Mickey paradigm is that the girl is still secondary to the boy, who plenty often appears by himself. You know, even Hello Kitty's lesbian boyfriend Damn Daniel is an accessory to the queen, but Suntory's penguins are interchangeable and often inseparable. English language word salad or names clearly meant to imply a franchise that simply isn't there is quite common. Penguin Summer. Dew. Cycling. Lonely Penguin. Lovely Holiday. Penguin's Holy Day.
Today is holy day. Sunshine is bright. The sky is blue. The wind is fresh. We have a good time. We say, good day, good drive.
Penguin. Let's get at it again. Fishing. That lives in the water. Unyielding. Boxer Spirit Penguin. Some of these aren't even trying to hide it. I'm sorry, I just hit my desk. And there's a bit of guilt by association here. So many of them are minor infractions, but the rest being so blatant makes it harder for them to hide it. My Sunders. They are my sons. He is my younger brother. Hello. Virgin Poster Penguin Coon Thermometer. Oh my god, what did you do to him? I think my favorite is Jimmy Pendulix, an obtuse play on Jimi Hendrix. awesome. Before we get too wild and wacky and start laying the direct influence card on everything from Pen Pen to Piplup, I think it's important we keep in mind the statute of limitations where things become culturally accepted. Big difference between, wow, everyone's got these particular penguins on the brain, we gotta cash in, to the collective image of a penguin having these particular design elements. The Don Quixote mascot Don Pen was introduced all the way in '98, a relatively dormant period for Hikone's penguins. Penguin research expert and high school teacher Kazuoki Ueda wrote a blog post about the Suntory penguins following an email correspondence with a colleague, and mentions that Suntory sued the company Corporate over their penguin mascot. I couldn't find any more about it than that, and all things considered, this penguin isn't even very similar. As an aside, this Ueda guy is adorable.
In short, Suntory's penguin is the type that says, "It's a penguin, what's there to complain about?" Rather than expressing a specific type of penguin, it is an expression method that aims to embody the general image of a penguin. Open parentheses, caret, close parentheses.
While the first wave of official merch incorporated elements of the early commercials, later merch was more general, just penguins drinking beer, playing tennis, or just hanging out, man. No merch of penguins running after trains, or dolefully looking out at the tides, or Here's a tip for media literacy, and I mean media in the journalistic sense. I'm not just talking like identifying thematic nuance in your favorite cartoon. Throughout this video, I've smoothed over gaps in my knowledge by employing little writing flourishes to distract you from certain specifics. I don't actually know when Taco High and Gorilla Beer were introduced. The involved parties don't even seem to remember. You know, being a YouTuber is sort of like being a journalist, except everyone ignores your emails. Basically, I'm like if Michael Moore was a woman. I think this is an inevitable part of giving retrospectives, and I'm transparent when it matters. Let's rewind the tape a little bit here, which is why I'm here to tell you I do not know how many Suntory penguin commercials there are. There's conflicting information on the subject right off the bat. 9 commercials are available online, and everyone who writes about the series talks about it like it contains 9, but Norio Hikone, who again was continually involved in the production of at least some of these, says there are 10, but I think there were actually 11, maybe even 12? An exhibition of Hikone's work was held recently, and in one of the rooms, a whole bunch of production materials from the Suntory commercials were posted all over a wall. Alright, here are storyboards for all the commercials laid out vertically, more or less in line with the broadcast order I've seen listed. Binoculars. I don't remember those. I guess this is the 10th one Hikone mentioned. That would make this a fall of '85 release, so after Penguin's memory, but then there are 2 rows that take place in snowy settings that have got to be for the winter of '85, and I can't really discern continuity between these cells. Did they only air for a short time, or not very frequently? Is it just happenstance that they haven't been taped? Was this in the final minutes of the Penguins 15 of fame? These are cells, so the animation might have been totally completed. Did they not go to air? Could something out of their control have caused them to go unaired entirely? I don't have any direct leads, and this exhibit is the only time I've seen or heard anything to do with them, and I'm just not great at hunting this stuff down. I'm going to enter the speculation dimension because there are a number of potential factors that occurred in the back end of '85 that might be at play. The answer may very well be important to our story at large, potentially explaining the absence of Suntory's branding in the film. While Seiko Matsuda wasn't the only featured singer, she was the most iconic, and in summer of '85 she found herself in a bit of a media frenzy. Just a month after announcing the breakup of her boyfriend of 3.5 years, she announced her engagement to Masaki Kanda, co-star of the film Kari, The Symphony of Love, which had just wrapped shooting earlier that year. Both of these announcements were major shocks, and in June she took a hiatus so the two could marry. It's also possible Penguin's Memory, which was produced in parallel to these commercials, came to serve as a good stopping place. The commercial from spring of '85 features a noticeably upbeat tone compared to the rest, and I saw one blogger posit this may have been in anticipation of Penguin's Memory's release, planting seeds for the film's own discrepancies in tone. Conjecture, but I believe it. I mean, look at how little vignetting there is in this one. Stark contrast. In many ways, the film was the most significant culmination of the commercial team's efforts. On its face, an anime film staff comprised largely of people working in the advertising industry was an unlikely, nearly preposterous notion, and its production history really proves what a triumph it was. Before I get to the biggest potential reason for the commercial's ending, let's dig into that history. Penguin's Memory wasn't commissioned by Suntory. It was a lark thought up by the ad team and given Suntory's blessing and partial funding. Takeo Nagasawa, the creative director behind the Penguins, said that the night after they all agreed to make a film, upon returning to his home, he exploded into tears, overwhelmed by the totality of the prospect, good and bad. So real. It got hung up in bureaucratic problems for a while, and the next 5 months were reportedly quite difficult. Some of the staff expected it to be cancelled outright. But as those issues were resolved, a melding of two worlds came together to bring the film to fruition. Animation studios and commercial studios rarely overlap like they did in the production of Penguin's Memory. Generally, an ad team will commission an anime studio, if anything. Rather than pass the concept off to a screenwriter, it was Takeo Nagasawa who was in charge of the film's story. He struggled under the scope of the task. As a result, writing a whole film is a lot different than writing a piece of ad copy or even a commercial. The staff's primary goal was to create a work with a mature tone in order to filter children. That was his only lead before copywriter Yuichi Watanabe told him about how he spent his 20s nomadically, unable to decide on his ideal career path, one of which was being a librarian. Those stories from a former wayward youth had a huge hand in shaping Mike's character, in addition to his experiences in the Delta War, the staff's solution to keep kids away. Both of those primary elements called to my mind, and this is a comparison others have drawn, the new Hollywood movement of late 60s and 70s American cinema. I don't like describing genres or movements because everyone has differing opinions on what the defining traits are. So here are some bullet points from author Todd Berliner's Hollywood Incoherent, as quoted by good old Wikipedia. If you would, extend me the grace of recognizing this is a very short diatribe about a variety of highly complex subject matter by an enthusiastic non-expert, and judge accordingly. The United States versus Paramount Pictures case of the late 40s gradually gave way to independent movie theaters playing more and more independent movies, right? In the 60s, a strata of film featuring wandering protagonists adrift in exile and inconclusive, often pessimistic narratives began resonating with more and more disaffected youths. To them, those traits felt novel to cinema, but commonplace to the world they lived in. Intrinsically, they interfaced heavily with the Vietnam War, directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously. The naturalism these films sought to achieve became a kind of standard in the 70s among a healthy vein of the decade's highest grossing. Even The Exorcist, remembered for its loudest scenes, feels nearly realistic, so grounded by its procedural rhythm and flat affect. But in the 80s, while Reagan was ignoring our AIDS and taking away our Quaaludes, his Kroger brand Chicago school deregulation policies collude with the codification of the Hollywood blockbuster, and the kinds of movies that made it to the mainstream prioritized the kind of spectacle that led every single R-rated movie to a tie-in Saturday morning cartoon, a line of action figures, bedsheets, Kraft macaroni, and a Nintendo game. I like those movies too. First Blood, the first Rambo movie in particular, splits the difference in an interesting way. Simultaneously, this subversive tragedy and an action smash with a Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack. I think it's a perfect film. Meanwhile, the Japanese film industry had been largely displaced by television. Screenings of American blockbusters were on the rise, and huge generalization incoming. The booming economy had, in a sense, suppressed the social and political unrest that defined the previous decades. I'm not ascribing any intent, but at a time defined by spectacle and prosperity, calling back to the Vietnam War in such a quiet way is an inherently political act, even if you dress it up with a different name. The Funny Penguin movie is totally no bullshit in exploring Mike's PTSD. It blows right past the war itself in the first 10 minutes and only returns to those images a single time. It's like visiting a memorial site in contemplative silence. Please don't laugh. Actually, I'll get wackier for you. Metal Gear Solid 3 is kind of similar, a game with one foot in classic and pulp cinema camp, the other entrenched in a sober, cynical reflection on how the Cold War steered history to the present. So yeah, First Blood, Penguin's Memory, and Metal Gear Solid 3, all the same story. Unsurprisingly, New Hollywood wasn't on the minds behind Penguin's Memory. All the influences they cite are, like the commercials, pretty rooted in the era of Hollywood's golden age. Hikone was also a proselyte of German-French director Max Ophuls. Film movements are often about sharing sensibilities and perspectives than all being inspired by each other, and this one's called New Hollywood, so a similar lineage is of course present. Here's an amazing Robert Altman quote.
I love Brief Encounter. I was 19 or 20 when I saw it for the first time. What I got out of it was that older women who wear sensible shoes are also attractive. Very attractive. The film had a big impression on me.
That's my fucking guy. Anyway, I think it's significant that Penguin's Memory gives Mike, after all his hardships, the Hollywood ending. A drive into the horizon without a hail of gunfire waiting at the end. It's not spoilers, it's history. I think all this might make Penguin's Memory the only of its kind, an honorary New Hollywood animated film. That's very silly. I just remembered Fritz the Cat exists. Are we counting Fritz the Cat? Does Fritz the Cat count? If you're looking to get into New Hollywood, just check out whatever looks interesting to you. Modern film carries so much of this era in its veins, so there's not as high a bar to entry as you might think. Here's some of my favorites. Head is seriously unbelievable. It's like 1960s Nirvana the band The Show. During this time, Nagasawa, who was busy with advertising work, teaching, and work on the film, took to completing the film's first draft, holed up at a claustrophobic 27th floor hotel room, at which point a trio of siblings took it to the finish line. These sibs are Ryo Kawasaki, Rei Kuno, and Io or Hiroshi Kono, all broadcast writers by trade, meaning they were in charge of the construction of non-narrative television like variety shows, meaning info on them is hard to come by. Ryo Kawasaki is the only one with any readily available anime credits, later composing the story for Futari wa Precure. An article on Penguin's Memory from the May 1985 issue of Animedia mentions the voice cast had yet to be decided. They also described the film as likely to be fun for both adults and children. I can't imagine Suntory was thrilled about that. In line with the rest of the production, a similarly bifurcated set of actors were eventually recruited, those of live action and animation. Recent winner of the 1982 Blue Ribbon Award for Best New Actor, Koichi Sato, would voice protagonist Mike. He had yet to do anything of much note by that point, but went on to be in films from high-profile directors like Shinji Somai and Kinji Fukusaku. And to this day, he frequently ranks in women's magazine popularity polls. This is probably overly prescriptive, but I think coming from outside the anime industry let him put a lot of naturalism into Mike's character. He's got a soft-spoken and unassured quality that really struck me.
子供の頃から本が好きでした。本に囲まれて暮らせたらといつも思ってたんです。
That's not to diminish the Seiyu, though. Acting across Sato is the great Hiromi Tsuru, just a year out from voicing Bulma. At that point, she was Kim in Macross and Perrine in The Story of Perrine, a World Masterpiece theater anime I particularly like, based on the few episodes I've watched intermittently. Other noteworthy cast members are Fujiko Mine herself, Eiko Masuyama, and commercial voiceover guy George Tokoro as the piano player. When first talking about the film, I alluded to the music in Penguin's memory being a large part of its very existence. I meant that both because Matsuda's song was essential in the commercial's success, and because I'm sure it was to everyone's benefit to use the film as a vehicle for the idols involved. This placed an emphasis on the film's music. Score was composed by Masataka Matsutoya, who scored a few Nobuhiko Obayashi films. Where the vocal songs are concerned, Matsuda's Boy no Kisetsu, an orchestral version of Sweet Memories, and a new song, Blue Love Letter, were included. In addition, a non-Matsuda song, Aozora on My Mind, was sung by Fumiko Sawada, the voice of Nancy. I'm sorry, but I have to make a quick detour into her career because even in the context of this video, it is bonkers. At age 19, she debuted as the Japanese voice behind Misha the Little Bear, image character for the 1980 Moscow Summer Olympics. Unfortunately for Sawada, Japan would later pull out of the event when Jimmy Carter called for an international boycott following the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan, which resulted in what was considered a proxy war in the face of Cold War tensions, given these states were supplying weapons to the Mujahideen as part of the CIA's Operation Cyclone. A 26-episode Nippon Animation TV anime still made it to air. This was my first time hearing about the Moscow Olympics, and it's just blowing my mind. Like, 2016 and 2024's Olympics both saw participation from more than 200 national Olympic committees. There were only 16 at the Moscow Olympics. Unrelated to geopolitical conflict, yet somehow crazier, Fumiko Sawada would drift from the music industry, pivoting to a long-standing pet passion of hers, real estate, which she saw tremendous success in, to the point where she's arguably better known for that than her music. This success was in no small part due to her approach. Following a series of major personal tragedies, she modeled her trade in accordance with the teachings of the good book. Yes, that's right, Nancy the Penguin became a real estate warrior of God following the tragic death of her husband in 1990. She is so fucking awesome. That Michael Moore joke I made earlier wasn't meant to be the setup to a bait and switch. This video just keeps folding into itself as though it's a lump of dough I've been thoroughly kneading for 3 months. One of the recurring images in Penguin's memory is the harmonica Mike retrieves from Tom after he's been killed, which Mike plays throughout the film. While Matsutoya composed the harmonica pieces, they were performed by acclaimed harmonica player and manufacturer Lee Oskar. Information on how and why he was recruited for the film was hard for me to come by, despite it being present in so many of the film's most important scenes. It occurred to me very late in production, like I'm writing this within hopefully 10 days of this video's release, that I could try to get in touch, so I did, and heard back promptly, and within just a few days, Lee and I were on the phone.
Is this Hazel?
It is.
Hazel, this is Lee Oskar calling you. Is this okay?
The man was just lovely to speak to. Our hour-long conversation revealed a lot of key information, not only about his involvement, but about the film's production at large. I really can't thank him enough for being so open about such a tiny sliver of his career.
And it's also really an interesting part of my life, that particular story I shared.
In the Japanese market, Budweiser is owned and distributed by Suntory. Lee said that, at least in the 80s, the beer inside Budweiser cans was the same as Suntory's canned beer. Early in the decade, he did the music for 3 Japanese Budweiser commercials that went to air, credited right up front at his request. The ad agency producing those commercials was helmed by Takeo Nagasawa. Nagasawa approached Lee after he contributed to those commercials, asking him to play harmonica for Penguin's memory. And as it turned out, the film was deep enough into production that it was already being animated. And it was because Lee said yes that Tom's harmonica appears at all. Watching the film after learning that felt like seeing into the Matrix. I can kind of tell which scenes were either reanimated or hadn't yet been animated at the time Lee got involved. Moreover, I noticed which shots felt like inserts. In the cave, there's a small break in shot continuity where Mike goes from playing harmonica to kneeling down at Tom's side. You could cut around the harmonica playing and still have a cogent scene. Similarly, when you see Mike sitting on the dock in silhouette, you hear that he's playing harmonica. But every previous shot had him reading poetry. Imagine this scene without Lee's playing over it. He's still reading poetry. It's very clever. Despite any work that had to be redone, I think this was an addition that improved the film, makes it richer, more tactile than it already was. The blues harmonica is such a strong symbol of Americana, it makes perfect sense why Suntory would want to sell Budweiser to the Japanese market using that association. Likewise, Americana is central to Penguin's memory, making Tom's harmonica a sort of totem like this is beautiful. During our conversation, I asked Lee if he caught wind of the mysterious production issues the staff alluded to. He told me he could sense a certain strain in the air about the film's development, and that the air seemed to have cleared a bit by the time the staff completed their work with him.
You're in business long enough, you know, hey man, that's a very special, unique situation. I felt honored. I really appreciate when I'm being acknowledged, and it's so important for them to include that. That's big time for me. I mean, that shows that I had an opportunity based on being something unique to them. You know, that's always a wonderful feeling.
Oh, and while I'm here adding more to the video, I might as well clarify something that I've been glossing over because I've just struggled so much to learn anything substantial about it. The third entity producing Penguin's memory was CM Land, which I believe Nagasawa may have owned or operated or was otherwise closely affiliated with. There's really not much information on them that I could find. I'm not sure if they were initially subcontracted by Hakuhodo, or if it was a branch of theirs, or what. Lee was one of the few people to directly acknowledge the company. If you'd like to extend me some grace, let's take the biopic route and say I rolled Hakuhodo and CM Land into one for narrative reasons. Look man, I'm nothing if not transparent. In the run-up to completion, a battle ensued between the animation and commercial staff over the poster, a rare instance where their respective sensibilities did not mesh. The animation staff wanted a traditional poster based on a still from the film, while the commercial crew wanted something stark and stripped back. They eventually won, and I think they had the right idea. I love this poster. June 22nd, 1985 saw the release of Penguin's Memory, playing in around 150 theaters on 16mm film stock, making our little gloomy penguin the very first commercial mascot to be the basis for a theatrical film. Staff visited various theaters to gauge the audience's reception and found it had become a date movie. All over the country, you could hear women sniffling and futzing with tissues and hankies during the final act. It must have been a relief not to see the seats full of befuddled or upset children. Penguin's Memory reportedly sold more than 1 million tickets, recouping its production cost of nearly 300 million yen, helped as well by its semi-frequent TV broadcasts and its home media release in September to VHS, Betamax, and Laserdisc. It is now time to dig into the reason most often cited for the end of the Penguin's TV commercial reign. Your first guess on what could cause a controversy that resulted in the discontinuation of a series of beer commercials featuring cute penguin mascot characters is probably pretty accurate. The veracity? I'm not sure.
Little kids drinking beer!
My 21st century American mind reeled upon seeing this set of ads for Mother's and Father's Day 1983.
To a mother who is sometimes prone to anger, but is mostly very kind.
Father's job is to work. My job is to be a good child.
In order to be a good child, buy beer for your mom or dad. Oh my god. I'm guessing this tiny text is a disclaimer of some kind, but I can't find any larger photos, so it's unreadable to me. Just know that, fortunately, or unfortunately, Suntory wasn't inviting children to break the law. This technically is, or was, legal. The law prohibiting minors from drinking, enacted in 1922, regulated the minimum drinking age to 20, but not the sale of alcohol. The law dictates that the responsibility falls upon the shopkeeper to discern when a minor may be purchasing alcohol with the intent to consume it themselves, and under those circumstances, refuse sale. Bearing this in mind, you'd imagine teens get turned away much more than young kids. Their age itself is a motive for drinking. Anecdotally, however, it doesn't seem anybody's really trying to obstruct sales to anyone of pretty much any age. To be realistic though, there are studies that report a direct correlation between exposure to advertising and increased alcohol consumption among those below drinking age in Japan. You know, something about all of this is starting to not sit right to me, actually. I think my American millennial senses are tingling. Oh god, are the Suntory Penguins Japanese Joe Camel? Or the Budweiser frogs. No, they're Willie the Cool Penguin is the cute little top hat clad penguin that served as the mascot for Cool cigarettes in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. His association with cold climates made him and his girlfriend Millie perfect to hawk menthol cigarettes. Cool's advertising at the time was centered on being a smoother, easier alternative to regular cigs, so there are all these rhyming comic strips where Willie makes the least persuasive arguments ever.
Willie the Penguin. When April showers make you cough like crazy, refreshing Cools taste fresh as a daisy. Got a cough? Switch from hots to Cools as your steady smoke for that clean, cool taste. Cool cigarettes.
Remember the point I made about how you can't market canned beer on its superiority to bottled beer if you also sell bottled beer? Ooh, pepper shakers. Somehow Willie wound up getting licensed out to a comic publisher for use in a context completely detached from any nicotine products. He actually saw the most unbelievable comeback around the time Joe Camel was smoking and gambling and drinking and driving his way through his time on the world stage. And that's not unbelievable as in unbelievably lucrative. Unbelievable as in among the legendary backlash Joe Camel faced. One of the more left-field accusations leveled his way was that his success was the result of subliminal advertising as a phallic symbol, because his face looks like a dick and balls. This is obviously ridiculous, but he does have some serious Scorpio rising energy in some of these. Well, 1991 saw the test market entry of this jacked to shit monster who took the implied but understated homoeroticism at the forefront of Joe's appeal and shouts it at the top of his lungs. Don't knock it till you try it? Try kissing a man? Don't say I never gave you nothing. An STD? Did he give me an STD? I can't speak for Big Willie. In my young mind, 12-year-olds were ripping darts in class clear through the 40s, but old Joe's whole goal wasn't demonstrating directly to children how badass smoking cigarettes is. It's cultural saturation to stimulate the neocortex. Culture is so inundated with symbols that you only have to see old Joe a couple times before he's the first thing your mind goes to when you think of cigarettes. I know that's true of me. I was born just a year before the campaign ended, so all my earliest conscious memories exist among the rubble of the proverbial nuclear fallout, surrounded by memorabilia stamped with his visage, catching glimpses of sun-faded posters and gas stations named some shit like Pump and Dump or Town and City Market Deli. This proved yet another insidious genius in Camel's marketing. Not even his death could kill him. Was this the mystery of Menthol Mountain? I wonder who there was more merch for, Old Joe or the Penguins? If you'll recall, the whole reason these penguins were made was to reach the family demographic. When asked to run errands for mom and dad, a child's eyes will go right to Suntory's beer on a shelf, much the same as mom and dad's, with their instantly recognizable mascots emblazoned on the cans. Maybe they'd come to mind as soon as they read the grocery list. Is it okay for a child's mind to be so occupied by beer? This is a question supposedly asked by parents and PTAs the country over, which led to the discontinuation of the Penguins. This is the final possible reason for the 2 missing commercials. What even is a mega popular media property without a controversy? I couldn't dig up a single concrete piece of evidence about this. For how open all of the people who worked on the Penguins are, they wouldn't dare acknowledge this. If it's true, it'd make them and their colleagues look bad. So my primary sources are off the table, leaving me with a lot of unsubstantiated evidence to sift through. This is accepted as fact, maybe because everyone writing about it uses each other's claims as evidence. Here's a big repository of commercials pulled or edited or made infamous for controversy. This tickles the part of my brain that was really fixated on media controversy and conspiracy as a too young child. The usual suspects are often at play, actors getting into scandals or perceived insensitivity to the destitute and those with deformities, having fun expressing joy too close to the emperor's death, Queen of England style. The cases documented on this website all seem to be real, and include some really infamous ones like the legendary "I'm the one who cooks, I'm the one who eats" commercial. The Penguins are an outlier in this regard. During the Penguins' popularity, certain merch could be redeemed by mailing in proof of purchase seals. Camel also did this. This led children and teens to buy beer in order to get their favorite penguin object. PTA groups caught onto this and gave Suntory hell, which caused them to end their association with the characters. This is the commonly agreed upon narrative, but this site goes into more detail that highlights some strange inconsistencies. It says the commercials were discontinued in '84, but continued to run for another year. I think this only makes sense if it was Suntory's future plans for the Penguins that were cancelled, i.e. leaving the final 2 commercials that had started production unaired. But these commercials weren't being produced that far in advance. Sweet Memories was recorded like a month or 2 before the Penguins made their broadcast debut. But nobody I could find who has written about this IP has picked up on the existence of the unproduced or unaired commercials, so there isn't even a direct correlation between the two, just my observation. I also think that that would be quite strange if they didn't also cancel Penguin's memory. This is really not my lane, and I think unfortunately, I have to accept that I'm missing a critical piece of evidence that's likely out there somewhere on the web even. This is everything I got. This site does make an interesting observation though that I otherwise wouldn't have caught. The 2010 Boss Coffee commercial that features the Penguins and Seiko Matsuda actually edits around all of the alcohol in the original commercials. It's not a commercial for alcohol, so it makes sense, but it also speaks to another interesting development in Suntory's relationship to advertising. Suntory's website boasts that in '76, the company established an advertising code, but I couldn't find it as it was when it was put into effect. In '83, the Penguin ads begin airing seasonally until the middle of 1985. In '86, Suntory launched a Drink Smart campaign to promote moderate drinking, which I also couldn't find in its original form. In '87, the liquor industry came together to devise the voluntary code for the advertising and marketing of alcoholic beverages and the labeling of alcohol beverage containers, which came into effect in 1988. This writes in stone everything from the age celebrities and idols have to appear, to requiring labels saying drinking under 20 is unlawful, all the way down to font size and the length of disclaimers in TV ads. Self-regulation this rigid is the move with these industries that skirt so many fine lines. It's a necessary evil, preferable in every way to gulp legislation. Here are 2 interesting ones. F. Personalities and characters that have particular appeal to minors shall not be used for models for advertising alcohol beverages. G. alcohol beverage brand logos and trademarks shall not be used or licensed for use in clothing, toys, games, or other items intended for use primarily by minors. There's a lot of stuff about cans and bottles not being mistakable with soft drinks, as well as ads being kept away from things aimed at children, like TV blocks or magazines. Oh my god, it just occurred to me that this commercial for a non-alcoholic drink aimed at children has a poster for the beer penguins in the background. Ugh. Though a 2022 study reports they're prone to slipping up on this one. I could only find this code as of its July 2016 amendment, so it's possible these could have been added any time in the last 40 years, not just right out the gate. I have a similar issue with Suntory's current marketing code of practice. It expressly forbids the use of cartoon characters in advertisements, but I can't find when it came into effect. Who's ready for the YouTuber special? No, not that one! I sent an email to their marketing code department email, but I knew then and I know now that I'm not hearing back. How it goes. When the Penguins' rights holders ended their relationship with Suntory, they went through a period of being used to advertise all sorts of miscellany. I don't know when that happened, but I do know that Penguin calendars were given out annually for years. This one from 1984 has Suntory branding, but none of the ones distributed at Chiba Liquor and Foods stores from 1986 or 7 to 1992 bear the Suntory name. 92 is when Norio Hikone claims Suntory stopped using the penguins. A picture book was also released in Christmas of the same year. I can't find any Suntory branding on it either. In 96, they were using the Penguins Paradise name, but in 2001, Poppy Poo Penguins is trademarked, and the unnamed penguins are finally given names. Puck and Picky, which symbolizes another change. Because they were to be adaptable to any given company that would seek to license them for any given purpose, gone is the atmosphere they had crafted for Suntory. You see these and you'd never in 100 years describe this penguin as gloomy. I gotta be honest, I think there's something lost in this, even though I love seeing a little penguin using an iMac. Interestingly, said atmosphere is also lost in the modern day when the characters rarely represent any brands or products and persist solely on their increasingly nostalgic image alone, the ones associated with Suntory. A couple trendy stores have released Poppy Poo Penguins product lines orbiting their 40th anniversary, with these faux Memphis group patterns and pastel colors everywhere, screaming, "Hey guys, this is a thing from the 80s!" Functionally, the brand they represent now is the Showa era. Wherever they go, the 80s economic boom follows them like a shadow. Even Norio Hikone invokes the bubble era nearly every time they come up on his blog. I guess it's funny that the commercials were themselves drawing upon touchstones whose antiquity gave them inherent significance. These penguins hold a strange legacy. Aid to a liquor company during a Great Beer War, the first mascot to ever be the basis for a theatrical film, the second penguin mascot to advertise drugs to children, symbols of Showa romanticism, Funny Club Penguin PTSD movie, forebearer of the device from Konami's Frogger Ancient Shadow, a point of pride for a Danish harmonicist, primary inspiration for a comic titled Cat Shit 1. Yeah, seriously, Cat Shit 1, known also as Apocalypse Meow, is a manga about the Vietnam War as depicted with rabbits and cats. This is a digression I've spared us from, mostly because the part of it I'm most interested in is the part where it is a comic called Cat Shit 1. Despite all my confusion around the conclusion to the Suntory X-Penguin relationship, we've had an answer to the question that got us here, this video's namesake, since about the halfway point. Everything that followed was a matter of ruling out every other possible culprit, and because it was a fun ride. Whatever the reason, the possible cancellation of the commercial line is irrelevant to Suntory's involvement in and absence from the film. The presence of alcohol in Penguin's memory is no different from the presence of alcohol in any movie aimed at an older audience. It is something that older audiences drink. There's no Suntory branding in Penguin's Memory because it was never conceived as a commercial. If it was conceived as a commercial, it would have been set in Japan. If it was conceived as a commercial with an American setting, the Penguins would have been drinking Budweiser. The ad team came up with the idea to make a movie because they wanted to make a movie. And the movie they made was somehow completely bulletproof. Despite any developmental struggles, it saw the light of day and made its money back without controversy. The rights to the Penguin characters have been in the hands of HoriPro since 2005, but I don't know where that puts the film. I'd love to see it resurface in better quality somehow. A Blu-ray transfer from one of those 16mm theater prints would look great. Right now you can find it in standard definition on YouTube, so it's at least easy to watch, even though the titles are both wrong. Hey, wait a minute! Ah shit, I almost forgot! Here's the reason some folks and websites know Penguin's Memory by the name A Penguin's Memories. It's an honest mistake. Fandom.com's search engine devilry and the general decay of the internet as we know it pushes to the top of Google search results and previewed sidebar information the Ideas Wiki. When I first stumbled across this myself, I saw the banner and I assumed the Ideas Wiki was a wiki that documented, well, every idea, as in they had the idea to make Penguin's Memory and they made it, but it was still an idea at some stage. Now it's on the wiki. Look, I don't know. Anyway, it's a wiki for ideas that are only ideas, turns out. Things and people that aren't real. I feel a little weird blowing up anybody's spot here. This is clearly a very dedicated community, and I know sometimes close-knit scenes like this want to keep to themselves, but I, one half of the normal creepypasta video bitches and Dude Gizardo superfan, feel an affinity with the mission statement, just make some stuff up for fun, and I'm kind of in love with this. Everything I perused on this wiki is so cute. So, A Penguin's Memories is, in short, an imagined recut dub produced for American theaters. That makes it sound pretty spare, right? Nah, this is Elfenlied Wiki long. It documents every last change to the source material. There are fake quotes from Siskel and Ebert. It's just brimming with all these little nuggets that make the mind wander and connections to other pages on the wiki. See, the American production team made an entirely new shorthand sequel in the 2000s, years after A Penguin's Memory was released, further exploring the character of Bob Adams, who the director thought went underdeveloped in the original. I appreciate the silent nod to the 2000s Penguins boom. It all comes back around. I think my favorite part of all this is that the overbearing compositing and vignetting is part of the lore. The American crew edited that shit right out in the recutting process. Check this out, a bunch of home media releases are listed, accompanied by mock-up scans of the associated box art and discs. Arrow Video released it on Blu-ray in the UK. It got a UMD release. The page and dub were initially titled War Penguin, which I imagine would have saved us from a lot of confusion, but the name they went with plays better. Certainly helps me justify the millisecond where I bought into this. I think myself pretty familiar with the anime that exist, whether or not I've seen them, and I had only learned of Penguin's Memory's existence like a couple months ago. Zero clue how I missed it, but if I didn't know about it, then I wouldn't have known about a dub. The totally hacked together English dub was just a thing in the 80s. We all know Warriors of the Wind, the Nazca recut brought to us by the unfortunately named Manson International.
Does it hurt much when you die?
There's even one that's significantly less plausible than Penguin's Memories. In the Aftermath, aka Australian Angel's Egg.
And I wondered when I rendezvoused with my brother of all the places he'd seen, and whether he'd ever carried an egg.
Dubbed, recut, and stuffed full of live-action nonsense, created by people who thought the original was incomprehensible.
He's a doodler, perhaps. Or maybe the devil's sketching a scheme.
These penguins hold that special quality in the English-speaking internet where anybody who appreciates them beyond Penguin's Memory is like really into them, I guess myself included now. This page about a thing that doesn't even exist is a third the length of this video's script. I think that's so awesome. Here, hold on here, I'll put on the YouTuber swell. Nostalgia is a complicated emotion, easily exploited by the hands of consumerism, leading us to idealize a distorted version of the past, but it's a human instinct, and that means it serves a utility, a reason to remember it all. When we recall our personal histories, the time and places in which our memories occurred, it's imperative we remind ourselves there's more to the story than the images that flash through our minds. No, I'm fucking around. I hope I was able to turn you on to some stuff that speaks to you, and I hope you had a good time watching. It's strange to realize I've been doing YouTube just long enough that a lot of these sources cropped up while I was in the middle of working on videos across my whole career. As properties hit more and more milestone anniversaries, more and more of their stories are made available. I couldn't have made this as thorough as it is if I'd learned about and decided to cover Penguin's memory a couple years ago. And I'm sure if I'd waited even a year to make this video, I'd have an even clearer picture. Well, I don't know, a lot of my videos are really aided by the production information many creators pepper through their social media accounts, Twitter especially, so there's some dread creeping in about the longevity of that information. Like, I don't even have a Twitter account anymore. I deleted that shit back in March. I guess the Suntory Penguin tale kind of resembles the film's content, a long, winding road that improbably took it to the place it was meant to wind up. I guess I'll let Grandpa close things out. Nothing makes me happier than seeing the characters I birthed receive acknowledgement. And beyond that, when the characters I've birthed are able to be traced back to me, I feel such joy, embarrassment, and awe. Thank you so much. Using the song from the Emily the Strange DS soundtrack was a lot funnier when it was right before Christmas, because it sounds like Ryuichi Sakamoto's theme for Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Should check that movie out. It's pretty good. Probably one of the best movies. Okay, bye.